For the last 3 years, I've exclusively played the London system with the white pieces, but in the last month, I've made the shift away to a different opening. In today's video, I'll be going through exactly why I made the change away to a different opening and giving a fair review to the London system, which is massively criticized. The reality is, the London system is played at the highest level of chess. It's not an opening that doesn't work, and it's quite fun if you actually know how to use it. I genuinely believe that I am the best person to take advice from regarding this opening. I can't give you a master level analysis of it, but I used this opening exactly like how anyone watching this video will need to use it. I used it to get from 0 to 2300 ELO, and my judgment isn't clouded by how it works at a master level, which is mainly irrelevant for most people watching this video. So why does the London system get so much hate? And better yet, why did I stop using it? Well, let's start with my thoughts on the London system as a whole. It is by far the easiest opening to learn in the game of chess. Whilst I do not recommend that you play the same moves every time you play, generally your pieces will land on the same squares no matter what happens. With that being said, the move order is absolutely critical in some lines. For example, if you want to play the London system against the Benoni defense, you can't bring your bishop out before the knight. For example, if d4, c5, c3, knight f6, bishop f4, black has the move queen b6. If you play queen b3 here, black can give you these terrible doubled isolated pawns, and without your queen on the board, this position is terrible to play. So let's get that very clear. Whilst the pieces do land on the same squares every time, the move order certainly matters. But apart from some general move order nuances, the London system can be played against virtually anything aside from the England Gambit. Although playing it against absolutely everything is obviously not going to be optimal, this can be super beneficial for new players who don't want to learn a lot of theory, but don't want to get crushed by black's theory. There's a big myth surrounding the London system, and it's that if you use the opening, your other chess skills are going to become underdeveloped because you rely on your opening too much. I would say the exact opposite happens. The only thing you need to worry about with the London system is that somewhere down the line you might need to change openings. But that moment might not come until your 2000 ELO, a milestone that a lot of players never achieve. For me, that milestone was 2300 ELO, so it might not happen to you at all. Another problem I have with people's understanding of the London system is that they judge an opening they don't know how to play themselves. If you're curious, I have a video on my channel regarding how you can play the London system without getting into these boring positions that people always talk about. This is the main thing that I hear about the London system. People say that it's boring, but it's only boring if you don't know how to play it properly. If you don't want to take it from me specifically, take it from International Master Alex Banzea, who has some great videos up on the London system. Let me show you the main thing that I mean. After d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, e6, c3, and bishop d6, this might just look like a boring London system position for you. But here is where we play the move that changes absolutely everything. Bishop d3. We're winning a crucial tempo here. Usually, white would drop their bishop back to preserve the pawn structure, but we're okay with doubling the pawns. If bishop takes f4, e takes f4, short castles, knight f3, knight c6, knight bd2, b6, and knight e5, you can see how exciting this position can be for white. We might not even castle kingside here, and even if we do castle kingside, we have a half-open e-file to lift our rooks on and attack the enemy king. These positions are unbelievably fun to play up until around the 1800 ELO mark. Generally speaking, the problem the black pieces will have against the London system is that there's no theoretical solve to it. You need to play continuous high-level moves to equalize against it, and if you don't, you're just going to end up defending the whole game. It's incredibly difficult for the black pieces to generate counterplay if they underestimate the attacking prowess of the London system. A seasoned chess player might have saw the problem that we had with the previous setup and why at a higher level, these games can be very boring for both black and white. Let's go back to move 7 here. The move c5 is devastatingly annoying for the white pieces, and is absolutely the sole reason that I stopped playing the London system. c5 will be the equalizing move for black in any kind of London game. White's plans largely revolve around the e5 square in the London, and a great way to improve the position is by opening the e-file. The move c5 forces white to walk on a tightrope. Let me orchestrate a few positions we absolutely do not want. After short castles and c takes d4, we definitely do not want to play c takes d4. We get an isolated pawn which black can target, and we also give black a fully open c-file to play with, making our half-open e-file a lot less useful. The best we can hope for in this position is knight takes d4, but after knight c6, we're forced to retreat with our knight, otherwise we're trading off too much material. Black simply controls too much central space in these lines, and white's game plan is extremely boring as we have to play very passively due to black's newly found tempo, with our preferred rook lifts no longer being effective. Black will also use its queenside pawns to march down the board in a minority attack. They will attempt to leave us with one single pawn on that side of the board after some trades, and go on to target the remaining pawn. Don't be mistaken either, this wasn't because we allowed bishop takes f4 at all. For example, let's go back. If we play bishop g3, black still plays c5 and we have problems. The pawn tension will just remain there forever. Black will not push c4, nor will black break the tension by capturing on d4. Black will just let its pawn sit there controlling central space. Again, we don't want to play d takes c5 because we're losing too much central control. Let's say after some natural moves like short castles, knight bd2, queen c7, bishop d3, and knight bd7, you can see this central pawn tension prevents white from making this e4 pawn break. The moment we castle, black will take our bishop and damage our pawn structure now that we can't utilize the open h-file because our rook is wrong-sided. Hopefully I've conveyed this concept well enough, but essentially the move c5 possesses the same ideas against the London that the Queen's Gambit does to black. It either forces you to live with whoever played c4 or c5 to have more central control, or forces you to break the tension in a way that might win you a pawn temporarily, but results in you conceding central space. Before we move on, I want to reiterate that the move c5 absolutely does not just beat the London system, but it certainly neutralizes it at a higher level. It leads to boring games for the white pieces where they're forced to play passively and positionally, and that's just not really what you want for the white pieces. If you're a mid to low rated player though, and somebody plays the move c5 against you, you can still absolutely get away with it and the London system will still be effective. The likelihood is they won't know how to follow up on such an important move. Whilst at moments the engine will disagree with your game plan, if black doesn't punish your aggressiveness in time, you're just going to have a fantastic attacking position. However, at the higher level, not only are players always going to find that c5 move, but they're always going to follow up in the correct way to punish your aggressiveness. This forces white to play conservatively and enter a game that is much more enjoyable for the black pieces than it is the white pieces. The most important thing to note about how I decided to move away from the London system was that it wasn't a decision that happened all at once. We can go back even as far as when I was 1200 ELO exploring new ideas with d4. The first one any d4 player is forced to study is the Anglin Gambit. Simply put, there is essentially no way to attempt to transpose an Anglin Gambit back into a London system. If after the move e5 you try and reinforce the center with c3, black can just push e4 themselves and restrict white of central space. Whilst this is the closest transposition you'll get at best, there is clearly a big concession here for white. So to avoid this, you're forced to learn mainline theory. The same can be said about any other opening against the move d4. If you try and force the London system, there is going to be underlying concessions you need to deal with. Most amateur players will never need to deal with this because their opponents won't know how to punish these slight inaccuracies, but at the higher level, they certainly will. Let's look at the Benoni for example. This was a change that I made to my repertoire at around 2100 ELO. After d4 and c5, I would just reinforce the center with c3. This is actually something we looked at before, because after knight f6, you're actually forced to play knight f3 instead of bishop f4 to avoid an easy way for black to equalize with queen b6. But even after knight f3 and d5, what does white play here? The engine actually thinks you just need to lock in your light squared bishop to avoid black's queen b6 ideas. It essentially wants you to play the call system instead. I tried to fix this problem on my own, so instead of knight f3, I would play bishop f4. This seemingly allows queen b6, but you meet it with the tricky queen c1. If c takes d4, c takes d4, and queen takes d4, you play queen takes c8 checkmate. So we're defending both pawns at once with this tricky move. However, I quickly found in over the board chess that players would just play knight c6. But this looks okay after e3, right? It looks like we've solved all of our problems. This queen c1 move did the trick. Unfortunately not, because black has this d6 resource. If knight f3 now, c takes d4, and e5 is played. Black uses our own trick against us and supports this e5 push with tactics. If d takes e5, d takes e5, and knight takes e5, for example, black has queen a5 check. Even if we go back and take with the alternate pawn, e takes d4, they still play e5. Now, d takes e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and bishop c5 comes. Bishop g3, short castles, bishop e2, and rook e8 is crushing for black. The white position is completely tied down. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that eventually I stopped reinventing the wheel and just learnt mainline Benoni theory. I stopped forcing the London system in every game that I played, and quite honestly, I couldn't be more happy with the results. If you're curious, after d4, c5, you just play d5. I won't go through all of the theory, but you end up with positions like this. They're quite similar to some King's Indian positions, and all in all, I not only found them to be much more enjoyable to play, but I had better results with them. The one thing I will say is that making the switch over to these openings forced me to become a faster chess player. Calculating the London system is easy and doesn't take too much time, but these new positions are much more dynamic and require you to calculate a lot faster. I then realized I could apply this to other tries from black. After d4 and f5, the Dutch defense, I stopped playing bishop f4 and started playing bishop g5, the Hopton attack. I didn't really want to play mainline Dutch theory because that would just play into what my opponent was comfortable with, so I learned something theoretical that was a little off the beaten track, and not only did I get great positions from this, but the results were in my favor too. Against e6, the Horowitz defense, I stopped playing bishop f4 and started taking the entire center with e4. If black plays c5, this transposes into the Benoni, and if black plays d5, we're now playing the French defense, something I also learned the theory for because there's just no easy way to punish the Horowitz defense with the London system. I could keep going on about this, but I think you all get the point. I didn't just flip a switch with my openings, I gradually started looking at different theoretical ideas to punish different defenses from black. What's important to note is that these decisions were made from my own logic. I didn't go on Reddit and ask people what the best openings were to play. I problem solved what I didn't like about the positions I was getting and found the root of the problem. I didn't start to dislike the London system and then completely swap to something like the Scotch game, which is a completely different opening with different pawn structures and different thematical ideas. This is a mistake that I see a lot of people make. It's much easier to change your opening when the opening that you're changing to somewhat resembles the pawn structure that you're used to. You'll find that unless you're using something extremely passive like the cow, the problem you're having with your opening is not the pawn structure, but the setup and the arrangement of your pieces. I eventually theoretically covered absolutely every sideline there was. I studied the Benoni, the King's Indian, the modern, and so on and so forth. But then I had a problem. What about just d4 and d5? The reality is, black responding simply with d5 is just the most solid way to approach the London system, because as we stated before, we know that neutralizing move of c5 is absolutely inevitable. I was still having major problems even though I had made all of this work to improve my repertoire. The reality was, there was no simple fix. My problem wasn't that I wasn't playing the sharpest lines in the London system, my problem was that the London system wasn't the best thing to play at the level that I had gotten to. It became too predictable for my opponents and too manageable. It's not like I wasn't playing the best moves out of the opening, it's just that the engine doesn't really like the London. The engine thinks that there are many ways for black to equalize as long as they understand why c5 is a good move. So with that being said, I made the change away from the London system, but I still needed to know what I was going to play in the case of d4, d5. It's important to note that my previous studies weren't for nothing. I was still going to use the Benoni, King's Indian, and all of the other theory I learnt because I wasn't planning on moving away from d4. But first, it was a little bit easier to cross some things off my list of openings that I didn't want to play. I felt that whilst the call system was interesting, it also didn't seem like enough of a step up from what I was already playing. Although it could be fun to learn, things like the Black Mardima Gambit was certainly not something I wanted to be a mainstay in my repertoire either. So that led me to one of two solutions, the Queen's Gambit or the Joe Barber London. I genuinely couldn't decide on which one to play, so I polled it on my community tab on YouTube and made you guys choose for me. If you couldn't tell by one of my recent videos, I ended up learning the Catalan. Of course, that also meant I was going to need to learn Queen's Gambit theory, but I also knew that I was going to have to learn things like the Slav defense, the Tarrasch defense, and the Grunfeld, so this didn't really matter to me. I essentially solved my problem of black playing the move c5 by playing a similar move myself on move 2. I identified something in my opening that I considered a weak characteristic, and I improved upon it. If I can condense down what I've just been saying into one short paragraph, it's this. If you're having problems with your current opening, don't completely change to something with a cooler name that Grandmasters also play. Change your opening based on what you like and dislike about your current one. I did the exact same thing with the black pieces 6 months earlier. I swapped from the Caro-Kann to the Sicilian defense. Those two openings transpose into one another from time to time, so the opening change made a lot of sense. At the end of the day, I think I made the right decision. When you learn a new opening, it's not like you forget all of the other opening theory you had known before. If I'm ever having a bad day with my Catalan, I can always revert back to the London and see how I go. But generally, the Catalan has been giving me much more dynamic games and stops black from equalizing so simply. If I leave you on anything in this video, I'll leave you with this. In 3 years of playing the London system, I don't have a single memorable game. I've had plenty of fantastic and unbelievable moves, but as games go as a whole, there weren't really any that would shock anyone. But in less than 1 month of playing the Catalan, I had this game that I'm going to end the video on. So let's walk through that game together. The game we're going to be looking at is one that I played on Lichess not too long ago. Ignore my rating on Lichess, by the way. It has crashed significantly since playing the Catalan. This is not because my theory is bad, but it's because I'm not familiar with the middle games yet, and I need a little bit of time to get over that awkward period where I'm not so comfortable in them. That will happen eventually. It happened with my Sicilian. My rating went down on my Lichess account, and then it went straight back up once I'd gotten used to the middle games. That kind of takes around, I would say, 2 to 3 months. Or at least it did for me. It might be different for you, but we'll get right into the game. We're also wearing the London System t-shirt in memory of the London System. The link for these t-shirts will be in the description below. But we start off with the move d4 and d5, and this is the biggest problem that I was having, or at least my most recent problem with the London System, was that after bishop c4, bishop f4, we have these c5 problems. So fighting fire with fire, we go c4 immediately ourselves, and we pose the exact same problems that were giving us problems in the London System. In these Queen's Gambit accepted lines, I've had massive success. Really, they're so fun to play with the white pieces. I genuinely think I might have a 100% win rate against the Queen's Gambit accepted. This is a really good try, a c5. It's actually what I play with the black pieces. Really difficult to kind of wrap your head around with the white pieces, and maybe a lot of people don't know the theory to it either. But really, I don't have a problem with it because I play it with the black pieces. I know what white should be doing. So black plays the Queen's Gambit declined in this game. And I know exactly what I want to do. I've studied the theory very recently. Let's go knight f3. And after knight f6, we go for this g3. And we're trying to get this Catalan set up. In fact, we have fully transposed into the Catalan now, as soon as you play this g3 move. And black goes for a line that I am very familiar with, and it's the Tarrasch defense. Chess.com thinks it's the Pseudo Tarrasch defense. I'm really not sure what the Pseudo is, or if I'm even pronouncing that right. But generally speaking, this is very easy theory to learn because every time they play c5, you chop off the center. You can play bishop g2. It's not really something I've explored massively. It just seems like c takes d5 is a lot easier theory, and it feels just very good for white anyway. You might be wondering what the difference is. You know, we've had this c5 problem in the London system, so why is it not so bad now? Because if they take in the center, these are just 2 big targets, right? So let's say they take in the center. First of all, we can play something like bishop g2. If they take, we don't immediately need to take. So let's say bishop g2 here. We can probably castle. Castling's the top engine move. And these 2 pawns are just massively long-term targets. So they're never going to take us in the center after that. But let's say after takes and bishop g2, they play something like bishop e7. We could now consider taking again, making them move their bishop again. But all in all, these pawns are just very difficult to defend long-term because there is no pawn on e6 defending it like there would be in these London system lines. So that's the main difference. In this game, my opponent takes with the knight. I still am in theory here. You go e4, kicking the knight back, and after knight f6, you don't get carried away with anything and pushing e5, although you technically can. The better move is to play knight c3. The reason that's the better move is because after takes, and takes, we're now threatening this knight b5 move. For example, if you play bishop e7, knight db5, and now we're threatening this c7 square, and you actually have to play an ugly move like knight a6, and then moves like bishop e3 come, where we're immediately threatening to win material on this side of the board. So really, black's pieces get very tied up if they do decide to take there. Instead, my opponent plays knight c6, attacking this pawn once more. And, you know, if once all the trades are on the boards, for example, we play bishop g2 now, they've got more defenders of the, or more attackers of the pawn than we do defenders. So we really have to make something happen here. Of course, bishop e3 is a move, but what is the better move is the move d5. We're coming with tempo here, hitting the knight, and although they will get the tempo back, we have a lot of tactics in the position because the position is so open. So of course, they take once, and then they're going for this knight b4 move, trying to counterattack this pawn. We don't have enough, or we don't really have a great way to defend it. So after knight b4, I actually go for this bishop c4 move, which was a mistake because I could have gone for the plan that happens in this game a lot earlier than I did. And you'll see very quickly what that plan was. They respond with bishop f5. Looks like an unstoppable threat. I mean, you could go back to b3 and really... a depressing position, I know. But what I did was castle. And this looks like a very difficult situation to handle because after knight c2 and rook b1, it looks like there's just discoveries galore, right? I mean, I'm not sure what the best move would be in this position. But it looks like there's discoveries and black is winning all sorts of material here, or at least it's an annoying position for white to handle. But instead, well, knight c2 is played, but instead of caring about this rook at all, I come with danger levels, bishop b5 check. And it's very apparent this king is absolutely wide open. So the move knight d7 is played, blocking the check, of course. And now we dive in with knight e5, completely disregarding this rook in the corner. My opponent was playing very quickly. Of course, you don't get to see the times. My opponent should have taken a lot more time than they did. I think they'd only spent about a minute leading up to this point. Clearly, they didn't know the theory. It's completely winning for white. But they take the rook, and then I take, they take back, and then I check. This knight is no longer guarding the e1 square, and this king is absolutely swarmed. They play bishop e7. It looks like maybe they're holding on, but now d6. And we're allowing black to take this bishop because we come with danger levels again, and that's exactly what happens. Bishop takes b5, rook check, the king has to go over, and then we recapture the bishop on b5. And there's a lot of ways to win here. I actually don't find the smoothest way to win. Black plays the move a6, and you should actually go for queen d5 here, just threatening this checkmate immediately. Queen d5, there is queen e8, so they immediately have to sack the queen. I go for this move knight c7, and then what follows after the move rook c8 is probably one of my best ever moves in the Catalan, which is the nasty move knight e6 check, forking the queen and the king. And the reason that you cannot take this is a brilliant move, by the way. Let me switch over to this scene so I can show you guys that this is a brilliant move. Chess.com thinks knight e6 is brilliant. I don't think it thought that allowing my rook to be captured was a brilliant move. I don't think knight e5 was a brilliant move. No, this is just a good move, even though we are sacrificing the rook here. But we do get a brilliant move here on knight e6 check, and we'll go back to this scene really quickly, because after the pawn takes, we get queen f3 check, and I won the game here because after king g8, there is checkmate on the next move. Thank you all for watching today's video. I hope that I provided an unbiased review of the London system and the reason that I'm not playing it anymore. I think it's a great opening for beginner chess players, and it's definitely the one that you should be playing if you know nothing about chess. But if you do have a lot of time on your hands to learn some decent theory, I would definitely go for something a little bit more advanced. As for more advanced players, I would definitely recommend looking at more complex openings for the white pieces rather than the London system. You might enjoy playing the London system around the 1600 ELO mark, but when you get to a higher ELO, you will definitely become frustrated by how easily black equalizes. It's a great opening overall, and one that receives an unbelievably amount of unnecessary hate from people that don't know how to play decent chess to begin with. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all in the next one.